So the reason why I'm making this video because I really believe that this statement in October of 2019 by NBA Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey in his tweet, and plus the response from Lebron James, and it's still it's still relevant until this day because there's a lot of things that are going on in the situations at hand. And I'm going to talk about the response particularly from three GOP senators. So let me get back into what happened in October of 2019 when Daryl Morey, he made this tweet saying about he stands and fight for the freedom of Hong Kong. And of course there were a lot of backlashes, especially from the NBA, because it was and I believe they were right, because he did it in a bad timing, especially when the NBA was going to have a game in China. And let me get to specific of Lebron James, because Lebron James was loud in making this comment. So Lebron James, he says that he believes that he didn't want to get into a feud with Daryl, and I will quote what he said. He said, "I don't want to get into a feud with Daryl, but I believe he was misinformed and uneducated at the situation at hand." And it has believed to be true that what Lebron James said about the tweet of Morey is actually true, because I used to think that what they were really fighting to preserve democracy in Hong Kong, but it turns out that it was not true. So it started like when of course the demand to hold off the extradition bill was taken too far, when the pro-democracy protesters started rounding up. They started beating the shill out of people who disagree with them or who have different point of views. So these protesters were radically beating up anyone on the street who speaks Mandarin or speaks Cantonese. Even to say that they're from mainland China can even get you endangered, or you can be beaten up for it. And this is what has been going on in the protest situation. And this was never shown in mainstream Western news outlets. You can even see these protesters beating up any innocent civilian who's not part of their protest. You can also see these rioters beating the heck out of the armed police, who are not even aggressive to these protesters. And that is contrast to what is going on in the racial justice protests in the US, in where the people who are protesting for racial justice are being tear gassed by the violent police, who the protesters themselves did not even start a fight with the police, but in fact the police started the fight. So these protests are being led by the Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai through his newspaper, the Apple Daily, being backed and funded by the foundation of the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Endowment for Democracy. And while yes, the CIA is behind all the violent protests in Hong Kong, there are even some footages of CIA agents instructing some protesters in the streets. you could also see some protesters harassing some elderly people. And you can also see a footage of an innocent Hong Kong civilian being burnt alive by these violent protesters. So I believe that Lebron James is fully aware that the protests in Hong Kong is not even about democracy, but it's rather a neo-colonial agenda. And I assume that he also knows that the Hong Kong protests in the 1960s were about social equality, when the British Hong Kong government was proposing laws to discriminate between the native Hong Kongers and the British citizens on housing discrimination. And he must have known that the movement to halt the extradition bill was taken too far out of context when they started violently vandalizing and tearing down the streets and breaking properties in the whole city. I also want to get into Louise Faye, the actress who recently was the star of the live action of Disney's Mulan. And she had the right to support the police because she herself is aware that the police are not the ones attacking the protesters or the rioters, but it's the other way around. And she got violently clashed online and calling for boycotts of the live action Mulan because over her sympathy for the police, or even trying to protect law and order in the city. So when Lebron James says that we talk about this freedom of speech, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there are times and there are ramifications of the negative that you think about yourself, but you're not thinking about others. And he's not wrong, and I believe he's right when he says that, because there are limitations to free speeches that you say, all in the name of free speech. And if you randomly just say things and not knowing you don't even know what's the reaction of the statements that you say. Example, I'm also political, but I'm also in the business sector. So if I'm with a circle of friends in the business circle, then I will have to talk things that are related to business. But if I'm with my political colleagues or political constituents, then I can talk things that are political. Now, does that mean that I'm limiting free speech or there's no free speech at all? No. You just got to be careful what you talk about in certain areas. And I believe it's true that when Lebron James says that just be careful what we tweet or what we say, yes, we do have freedom of speech, he's not wrong about that. So all these people that are saying or backlashing at LeBron James, or saying that he only cares about money, or says that the Chinese yuan tastes so good, all this nonsense, are the ones who are misinformed, and they're the ones who are not really looking deep into what is the situation in Hong Kong. And so if LeBron James only cared about himself and money, he would have not started foundations. He would have not made any social or political stands here in this country of the United States. And he would have not said this kind of statements about Daryl Morey's tweet about Hong Kong. But that is pure ignorance to say that the reason why LeBron James said that about Daryl Morey is because he cared about money, which it's totally BS. Because if LeBron James only cared nothing about money, he would have not make a stance against the racial and the social injustices. So there are about at least 3 senators who I will be talking about, and their stance about the situations in Hong Kong and the Black Lives Matter movement. And of course, I will be talking about these 3 Republican senators, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, and Rick Scott. So basically, Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, and Ted Cruz helped sign a democracy bill for Hong Kong. So Josh Hawley was loud in expressing his support for Hong Kong. And when it came into our shores, into our soil, when people started protesting or expressing out for racial justice, so he lashes out, even making curse words and calling them terrorists or scumbags to anti-fascist groups or sports figures or even other figures who are speaking out their support for Black Lives Matter. And now when the Trump mob invaded the Capitol, he took part on it. And he was blamed for taking part of the invasion. And now the other senators, other people in the House are now condemning him for it. Even the media is now condemning him for it. And now there are stories that are saying that but yeah, he's now becoming a pariah after that incident. And so there are articles here about Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley facing their consequences for the Capitol attack. And oh yeah, to Senator Hawley, you even lashed out at Lebron James and making this tweet that, these people in Hong Kong are risking their lives for so-called liberty. So yeah, to Senator Josh Hawley, you are one of the biggest hypocrites in the US Senate, aside from the 2. One of the biggest of hypocrites to say that people from across the Pacific are fighting for so-called liberty while they are emitting violence. And then you also say that these are anarchist, violent protesters when people here are expressing their protests for social justice. So yeah, it's time that you better shut up. And oh yeah, I'm just getting now to Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Oh yeah, you expressed your support for the so-called liberty and human rights in Hong Kong, which is just across the Pacific. And then when it came down here to the US soil, when people are demanding for social justice and racial justice, you called these protesters and anti-fascist groups like violent anarchists or destroyers. You even lashed out at Mark Cuban, that the Mavericks owner, who expressed his solidarity with the with racial equality, and you lashed out at him. And now you're also being blamed or being pointed out for enabling and inciting insurrection inside the Capitol. And you've also expressed a lot to overturn the election, which the American people had already answered their vote. So, lastly, I'm going to go to Senator Rick Scott of Florida. So, he also joined Hawley and Cruz in signing or expressing his solidarity for the so-called freedom in Hong Kong. And then when on LeBron James, he said that he made this tweet about the million-plus Uyghur communist China has in re-education camps had a tough week. The people in Hong Kong fighting for human rights and autonomy had a tough week. You're right, James. People need to understand a tweet or statement what can do to others. So yeah, he made this bizarre tweet responding to Lebron James about the shambolic genocide in Xinjiang and the shambolic liberty freedom movement in Hong Kong. And then when it came to the people protesting for social justice, yeah, he made statements about police reforms. And now one of the hypocrisy there that he made was making these statements that organizers of the Black Lives Movement are connected to communist China or connected to the communist parties or communist dictatorships. Yeah, what a hypocrite. And now he's also being blamed or taking part of being blacklisted because he, along with Hawley and Cruz, had also joined the rally to incite a coup or insurrection in one of the democratic institutes, and that's in the capital. And now, let's see. If I'm not mistaken, Rick Scott also here. So, yeah, he has been opposing on Biden's victory, especially in some states. So yeah, what a hypocrite that you subjugate or you when it suits you, or you speak about liberty when it suits you. So yeah, you hypocrite idiots, 3 senators. One of the most hypocrisies I've seen between the left and right media outlets, aside from lashing out at each other on the presidency of Trump or on issues of social justice movement, and they're so united when it comes to the movements in all over the world, or especially in Xinjiang or Hong Kong. And both of them express their unity or solidarity for the people of those areas or elsewhere without even, looking at the situation at hand. And now, both the liberal and conservative media from all sides, whether it's left or right, banded together to condemn Lebron James for his statement about Daryl Morey. So this is just what I want to say about the relevance of Morey and James, and plus the coincidence of the hypocrite senators doing the most stupid things in the United States. And oh yeah, they're the ones who are more loud about the so-called communist dictatorship, while they are the ones who are demeaning people for expressing their solidarity for racial and social justice. So this is my video for the day, and I'll see you in my next video.